Hey everybody, welcome to episode 8 of 13 o'clock. Tonight we're doing kind of a yicky, creepy kind of subject. Most of you have probably heard of the serial killer known as the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, who was caught and actually died in prison. Mm-hmm. But what many people do not know is that in the mid-70s to mid-80s, there was another serial killer and rapist in California who was known as the original Night Stalker. Or he's sometimes also referred to as the East Area Rapist.
Yeah.
Or the Golden State Killer.
Yeah, but this guy was the original Night Stalker.
Yes, this happened before the because Richard Ramirez was, I think it was 85, 86. This guy started in 1976. And the last murder attributed him to 1986. Now, the creepiest thing about this guy was that they never caught him.
He's still out there.
He's probably still out there somewhere.
And he was worse than Richard Ramirez.
Well,
he was a lot more organized. He was, I think, more deadly. He did more damage. What was it? 60 rapes? And
50 rapes.
50 rapes. And how many murders?
10 to 12 murders.
10 to 12 murders.
Now...
And he did couples. That was the weird part.
Yeah.
Yeah. He liked it if the guy was there.
Yeah.
He wanted him to watch.
And it's actually kind of timely that we're doing this because when I was researching the episode, like I'd always kind of been interested in this case anyway, but when I was researching the episode, I saw that because June 2016 was the 40th anniversary of the first crime, the FBI is doing a big, like a new rollout of billboards, and they're offering a $50,000 reward for new tips that lead to the identification, arrest, and conviction of this person.
Yeah, and when this happened, this kind of crossed my mind that maybe the FBI is thinking that because he's kind of getting up there in age, he's probably at least 60 by now, that maybe he's in the mood to do a BTK and step forward and cash in on his fame.
Yeah.
Because he'd get pretty famous for this shit. They never caught this guy, and he's a bad player. He's a bad player, and a lot of these guys don't want to just go out. They want to go out with a bang.
That did kind of occur to me also, because it seems like, and especially this guy's particular MO, he didn't really taunt the police like in the way, say, the Zodiac killer did, but he did call them and say where he was going to be, and he did kind of play with them a little bit.
He's up there with the Zodiac in terms of skill.
Yeah.
He never got caught.
No.
And
actually, they never even had any solid
real
suspects.
No.
Honestly.
No. So, I mean, if there's such thing as a serial killer role model, it'd be him and Zodiac.
Yeah.
And you never hear much about the original Night Stalker. That's when they tucked that one away on the back shelf. They want you to forget about the original Night Stalker.
Well, I think why that happened was because for a long time, before the advent of DNA testing, and because he actually started out in the 70s as a serial rapist, and then the murders came later, but it was like in another town.
Yeah.
And so since they didn't really communicate back then the way they do now, they don't have like a national database and all this other kind of stuff. So for a long time, they thought it was two separate guys.
Right.
Until somebody went through the cold case and checked the DNA and then found out that it was the same dude.
Yeah, it was the same MO, the same, I guess you could call it the same tech that he used. It's just that it escalated to where he killed the victims.
Yeah. And
he got more and more brutal as it went on.
Yeah.
So why don't we go ahead and tell the story? How does it start?
Okay, it started in 1976 in Sacramento. And the first things were a series of rapes. And these were... The MO was pretty much the same in every one. It was usually a woman in a house alone. The guy would either find... a window that was unlocked, or he would break in with a screwdriver, what have you, in the middle of the night. And he would, the woman would be sleeping, so he would sneak into her bedroom, wake her up with
shine a light on her,
with a flashlight in her face, say he had a knife or a gun, then he would tie her up and rape her. He always wore a mask. He sometimes disguised his voice. But none of the original rapist victims really got a good look at him.
Yeah, and he would stay in the house for hours, right?
Yeah, this was another thing, and actually, later on, I'm like maybe in a few minutes, I'm gonna play one of the women that was one of his victims, and it's about like a 3-minute clip of her talking about the experience. And that's kind of the most upsetting thing, is because he would come in their house, he would tie them up very tightly, their arms and their ankles.
They'd lose circulation.
Yeah, then he would rape them, and then he would wander around their house. He would dig through their shit. Mm-hmm. He'd go eat food out of their refrigerator. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he'd come back and rape them again. And a lot of the women said they didn't know, like they were afraid to move or try to escape because they didn't know if he was still in the house or not.
Right. And he was just yelling at them for the most of the time. There wasn't really any like torture per se. Like he wasn't cutting anything off of them or anything.
I don't think so. I don't think that was ever reported.
Right.
But it seemed like, and even from the very beginning, it seemed like he was very calculating. Mm-hmm. Like he would pick women who were home by themselves or home just with small children.
Right.
The house would usually be by a creek or a school or a big open field or woods or something like that where he could run and hide and escape easily. He usually knew the layout of the house.
So he broke in there beforehand.
Yes, because sometimes, and usually, neighbors had reported prowlers, there had been break-ins in other houses in the neighborhood, almost as if he picked a neighborhood and then he was casing the place to look for the best victim. On some occasions, he would, like if a house was for sale or something like that, but the people were still living in it, he would go in there and pose as a potential buyer so he could, check out the layout of the house. Now, this started in the 1970s. 1976 was the first rape. And there were, I think there ended up being, he ended up doing at least 50 rapes.
And it was like only in a 3-year period, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, from 1976 to 1979.
Man, that's a lot of stuff. And he had to case each one of those joints.
Yeah.
He had to find out. So, when I was looking at the list of crime scenes and victims, this guy, this had to be almost a full-time job for him.
Yeah, it would have had to have been because... the dates of the rapes, there's actually, if you go, there's a website, and I'll put a link in the description. It's EAR-ONS.com. That stands for East Area Rapist, Original Night Stalker. And they have a list of all his crimes and the dates and the victim. And it seemed like the rapes, there was one every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Which meant that, I guess in those weeks in between, he was doing surveillance.
Right, and breaking in beforehand, getting an idea of the layout of the place. He knew these houses.
Sometimes, if the women had guns in the house, he would take the bullets out of the gun.
He'd unload them.
He'd unload them and take the bullets. So then, even if she did get to the gun, it would be empty.
That makes me think that if he's in that neighborhood doing that surveillance, trying to find out where they live, and then coming up with a plan on how to get in and out of there. This must have been part of his job. He must have been something like a mailman or a cop or something like that would have given him the ability to go into those neighborhoods and not be seen snooping around. That's the only thing that really comes to mind.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think?
And it should be...
Because wouldn't he be at work?
Yeah.
That would take a lot of time.
Yeah. And it must be noted, too, that all of the victims were quite affluent. These were nice neighborhoods.
This is upper middle class.
This was upper middle class neighborhoods always. And so it's kind of telling that he was never really seen. Like, no one reported anyone suspicious.
Well, they would see somebody with a mask, but that was when he was going to do the mission. But that's
when he was going to do the mission.
I'm thinking that he worked in those neighborhoods doing something. A mailman? How would you find these women and where they live.
Right.
You know?
Like you said, I mean, as many as he did, and this is just the first part of his reign of terror, this first 3-year period, when he was just doing the rapes, as if that wasn't bad enough.
Right.
But, you know, it got much worse, as we will get into. But yeah, like you said, I mean, the amount of planning that went into this shit.
You couldn't keep a normal work schedule.
No.
You couldn't do 40 hours or 30 hours a week, working at, say, a coffee shop or at a mechanic shop or anything like that, and have time to do that. I'm thinking he worked there. Yeah. And doing something. Well, maybe he was a gardener, but I'm sure they would have checked that. But I was thinking something like a mailman, because some of the things that he did kind of had paramilitary paramilitary qualities to them. A lot of times, I'm an ex-serviceman. When you get out of the service, you get a job offerings at the mail, U.S. mail. Yeah. So maybe that's what he was doing. Maybe he was a mailman.
Because wasn't BTK was like a...
He was a dog catcher.
Yeah, it was like a dog catcher.
So I'm thinking it was probably a similar situation.
Where he wasn't somebody that would attract attention necessarily.
He was somebody official, I think.
Yeah.
Dog catcher, mailman, water meter reader, something like that.
And they did note that he might have had a military background because the ligatures that he used to tie up the women and tie up the victims was a very distinctive knot, a diamond knot. Yeah, which is a very difficult. Yeah, it's a very difficult knot to tie. Like, most people don't know how to do it.
And somebody reported that he had a bulldog tattooed on his forearm, which of course that's a symbol of U.S. Marines.
That's Marines, yeah.
And they have a lot of naval training. There's a Department of Navy.
Yeah.
So maybe he was an ex.
And there are a lot of military bases around there.
Yeah, maybe he was an ex-Marine, and then he, became a meter reader or a mailman. But I'm sure the cops would have known that. Yeah. And checked that. It's just weird. Could be that the report of him having a bulldog tattoo on his forearm, maybe that was a fake tattoo. Yeah. To throw people off. There's no way of knowing. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. And honestly, from all the rapes, some women escaped without, but like I said, he had weapons and.
Yeah, he carried a gun.
Yeah, he carried a gun and he had a knife also, and so actually, what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna play you this little bit. It's about 3.5 minutes long of one of the victims, while we're still talking about the rapes. So I'm going to play that for you right now. It's kind of upsetting, but
that's the topic.
Yeah, here it is anyway.
I woke up with a hand over my mouth, and I rolled out of bed. I just swung my arm. I said, "What are you doing?" He was going down the hall, and he was just hitting me. And then I just pretended that he knocked me out so he'd quit hitting me. And then I sock stuffed in my mouth, blindfolded, gagged, hands tied, legs tied. And then, pulled me up like this, because I was on my stomach, and put me back in bed and said, "If you move, I'm going to kill you." So, lay there for 2 hours. And he came in, I don't know, I think 5 different times or something like that over the course of the night, and raped me. And while you're laying there thinking you're going to die, you just are pretty sure that, I remember just kind of being in shock. I'm just laying there on my stomach shivering because I had a fever, and you know how you get the chills and you shake, so finally, after, our best guess is 2 hours. It went on a long time. At about 4:30 in the morning, I had heard a car drive away, and I started counting to 60 because I didn't have any concept of time. So I counted to 60 30 times, and I figured then a half hour would have gone by with no noise in the house, and I got up and didn't know if he was there. I used to say, and I'm sure that who knows, I remember saying when it was still going on, if they ever catch this guy, they should lay him on the floor and let everybody that he raped get to do whatever they want to him. I just thought that's what we should get to do. And then that thought kind of went away. But I thought, we should get to do what we want. We had to go through this. I don't think that I would need to hurt him. You know, if he was caught, I don't need to get any revenge. I don't need anything like that. I just liked it there to be closure, but I have to say, you know, it's felt pretty closed to me for a long time. I'm always aware of anybody coming up behind me, and it's not a fear. I don't have a fear with that. I'm just aware. I'll look over my shoulder all the time. And, you know, it's just the way, I'm sure that came out of it, but that's my, I guess, you know, my rationalization that I can do all these things because I'm super aware of what's going on. I have to do a lot of self-talk when my husband's away for the weekend. I have to tell myself that there's somebody next door that's a single woman that stays home every night by herself and she hasn't been attacked. I mean, I have to do this every time he goes away, and he doesn't go away very much, maybe at the most once a year. But I don't just peacefully go to sleep every night.
Okay. So
evidently that's what it was like.
Yeah.
For most people, at least.
Yeah. And another thing that he did while he was still on the rape kick, and this is still in the Sacramento area, was he would sometimes call the person who was going to be his victim. He would either call them beforehand, and he would say it was a wrong number, or he would just hang up.
Checking to see if they're there.
Checking to see if they're there. A couple times he threatened them.
Beforehand?
Now, yeah, see, it's not real clear. Like, sometimes he would come in and rape the woman, blah, 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 and then, like, a day or two later, they would get a phone call.
He'd call her back.
And he'd call her back, threatening to kill her.
Damn.
And actually right now, I have audio of one of his.
Yeah, okay, play one.
He's, like, disguising his voice.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is pretty creepy. Okay, check this out. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So,
Terror tactics.
yeah.
He's trying to victimize her a second time.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't forget about me. You know, that's
Yeah, it was that kind
I
of
still
shit.
got you. It's that kind of mentality.
And he also, they think that he called the cops a few times too and said where he was going to strike. Like, I'm going to strike on, I think, Watts Avenue or something like that.
Yeah, get balls.
On this day or something.
And he did.
And he did. Now, he didn't actually rape anyone that night, but they saw a guy on that street with a mask riding a bicycle. And most of the witnesses and stuff like that think that he would drive to somewhere near the site and then he would ride a bike.
Yeah.
To the actual house.
Yeah, he had stolen bicycles that he'd carry with him, and then he'd discard them when he was done with them.
Yeah.
So.
And it's weird too because a lot of
he didn't want anybody reading his license plate.
Yeah. Well, and the weird thing too is that
silent approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When there were suspicious vehicles reported, it was almost always different vehicles.
Huh.
Like, I think the only one that was reported in more than one case was a VW Bug, shades of Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
Although I think it was gray or green with the wide wheels. People also reported a white Pontiac. There were several other cars. So they don't know if the guy had access to a bunch of different cars, if he was stealing cars.
Right.
You know, what have you.
Probably wouldn't make sense to steal a car. That's just additional heat.
That's what I mean.
He just had illegal access to a car.
I didn't see anything that, said that there were stolen cars or anything like that. So, basically, he was a rapist. Now, they think from his profile that he probably started just as a burglar.
Right.
I mean, the FBI, like I was watching earlier, if you look on YouTube, there is a FBI press conference from June 2016 where they're kind of, summarizing the case and talking about how they're trying to, generate new tips and whatnot. And he said that aside from all the other crimes this guy committed, They also want him for 125 burglaries.
Yeah. But was he actually stealing anything of value during the burglaries?
He would just take kind of not super valuable shit.
See, that's not really a burglar.
He would take...
That's a peeping Tom.
Yeah.
That's gone. He's been peeping through windows, and then he's going to decide he's going to go in there and violate that space, maybe take somebody's socks or underwear so he could sniff them, something like crazy like that. And then he's watching, then later on he's watching women through the windows. Yeah. And then it escalates, I'm going to go in there and get one. Yeah. That's what he did. He's not a burglar. No. He must have money.
What? Yeah, they thought probably.
To walk away from the valuables. Because he didn't take anything valuable.
The most valuable thing he took, he would take like costume jewelry, which isn't really worth much of anything.
Just trophies.
Or he would take like coins. He particularly liked coins for some reason, like collectible coins.
Collectible coins?
Yeah, he would take some of those.
Weird.
So, in one case, they found the woman's TV in her backyard. Like he had started to take it, but left it. Right. Like he was trying to make it look like a botched robbery or what have you.
He had money.
Yeah, he must have.
Yeah.
Because,
robbery wasn't the motive.
Yeah, I don't think he ever took any money or anything like that. Like you said, he just took clothes. I think he took driver's licenses, shit like that.
Well, that's so you could threaten them later.
Right.
They know, the victims know that he has their ID. Yeah. So that's kind of like, I own you.
Yeah, I know where you live.
I know where you live. I know your name. Yeah. That's a psychological ploy there.
Yeah. So, basically...
Plus, it's also an easy way to remember the victim. It's a trophy.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And actually, I was watching because I kind of went off on the true crime thing today after I started watching that, so I started watching all these other crime ones too. And that is a very common...
It's a trophy.
It's very common of serial offenders, of keeping people's IDs and clothes and things like that. So, basically, from 1976 to 1979, there were... I think, like I said, about 50 rapes, right, in and around the Sacramento area. Now, at this point, things took kind of a horrible turn. In February of 1978, there was a married couple called the Majores. They were minding their own business. They were out walking their dog. A man approached them, and some kind of altercation ensued. Mm-hmm.
Which they don't really give you the details about that.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know why the guy, just walked up to him. I don't know.
The police don't want the public to know what the nature of the altercation was.
Yeah, maybe not. But as it was, the guy pulled a gun. Mm-hmm. The couple turned and ran. And the guy chased them. Yeah. He tracked down the man first, shot him point blank in the chest, killed him. Yeah. And the woman kept running, and she was running through people's backyards and stuff like that. Jumping fences and stuff. And then finally she got boxed in, and he came and shot her in the face.
Shot her in the face.
And she died also.
Didn't want any witnesses to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. And
and then the neighbors saw that, and he just ran, right? The neighbors saw some of that. Remember, they interviewed a guy who actually saw the shooting go down.
He saw the guy running off,
and he let that. And he saw the witness who saw the shooting. He let that witness live. Yeah, remember that?
That's right. That
little
guy,
redhead kid.
Yeah, they interviewed a guy who had seen some of it, and he said the guy looked at him.
Yeah. So, on a side note, the community was so terrified on one occasion. A woman saw him with a mask going behind another house, and she was too afraid to even call the police. She just let that person get raped. Yeah, she should have been charged.
Yeah.
All she had to do was go.
Look, I understand you're scared, but it's like
he didn't see her.
He didn't see her. It's
Yeah, that's crazy.
Help a sister out. Crazy. Come on.
You need to do time just for cowardice, letting people get raped and die that way, man.
Yeah, that's awful. Yeah. So
shame on you, whoever you are.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
Yeah, we don't know who that was. It was just somebody that lived across from one of the victims. Yeah. But it would seem that this kind of seemingly random murder of this couple was kind of like... That was almost kind of like when he graduated from just rapes to murders. Then... It's almost like the raping wasn't enough of a challenge anymore.
He had to up it. He had to up the ante, you know.
And what ended up happening after that, I think there were actually a few more rapes after the Majoris were murdered, but these rapes took place when the woman's husband was in the house.
Right. Maybe he got a taste for dominating a couple.
Yeah.
And he wanted the man to witness it.
Right.
What he was doing.
Because previously to that, he would target women in the house alone, teenage girls in the house alone, or women just with small children.
Right.
It seems like after the Majoris were murdered, he decided, well, I want to kind of up the ante. So what he would do now was he would specifically target a woman and a man, usually husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend, in the house. And he would go same kind of thing. He would break into the house beforehand, unload their guns, leave a window open.
Well, see, what I think happened with the first two slayings, the ones that were done in public outside.
Yeah.
Those weren't planned. No,
of course not.
So he killed two people and got out of there.
Yeah.
And that gave him a huge endorphin rush.
Yeah.
And that became part of his MO. He's like, you know what? I'm going to do that again.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that again. I liked how that felt.
Yeah.
That's what happened there. So he kind of stumbled into the murder thing.
Yeah.
Just added that to the rape and robbery and home invasion.
Yeah. Because there were actually a few cases where he would break into the house a few days before it was under surveillance.
He'd recon the house.
He'd recon the house. And then finally he would break in while the couple were sleeping.
Yeah.
Shine a light in their face, hold a gun in their face.
Yeah.
He would make the woman tie the man up.
Yeah.
Tightly.
And he'd tie up
Then he would tie up the woman, and then he would retie the man tighter.
Yeah.
And then on many occasions, then he would take the woman into another room.
Out in the living room.
Yeah, out in the living room. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes some people that lived reported that he would go get dishes out of their cupboard and put them the man would be face down.
They'd stack them on his back.
They would stack him on his back. And he said, if I hear these rattling, I'm killing her.
Right, yeah.
So.
And that's because the very first one that he did, the two got away. Remember
that's right.
that?
Okay, so
to prevent that from happening, he started stacking dishes on the man. So if he moved, he'd hear it.
That's right. The first one he did like that, he actually botched it.
Yeah, they got away.
He went in there. He did his tying up thing. The woman, he went back down. The killer went down the hall to check on the dude,
and she got up
and she hopped up to her feet. I mean, her feet and her ankles were tied.
Yeah.
But she got to her feet and she hopped out the door into the front yard and started screaming.
No, not the first time, second time.
Yeah.
He grabbed it. She hopped up. She got up and hopped out. He grabbed her, drug her back in. Went to check on the guy.
Yeah.
Because I think the guy was getting out. He's trying to get out of the house.
Yeah, he was trying to get out of the house too.
So he got him to lay back down, and during that time, that woman had gone right back out the front door again and started screaming.
Yeah.
So he runs and jumps on his bike. He realizes he's lost control of the situation. He jumps on his bike and
she was out in the front yard screaming, and it happened that their neighbor was an FBI agent.
Right, he heard
her screaming, so he called for backup and came out to see what was going on.
Saw the guy get on the bike and run off.
He saw the guy get
chased him.
And he chased him in his car, but he couldn't catch him. He went over and then...
the guy dumped the bike and ran into the woods.
Yeah.
And got away.
Yeah. So, and I don't think they didn't see his face, though, did they?
No, he's wearing a mask.
Yeah. I mean,
ski mask.
He wore a ski mask pretty much all the time. They do have composite sketches of him, but all of them look different.
One of them looks just like Ted Cruz. No joke.
I know. Ted Cruz and serial killers, man.
Well, they said he looked like the Zodiac Killer, but he looks like the original Night Stalker also.
Yeah. Especially like the original Night Stalker, one of the newer sketches that they have, that motherfucking smirk. Oh, man. God.
Well, they said he acted really superior.
Yeah.
Superior and arrogant.
Yeah. And, description, they think, I mean, he's a white dude.
Yeah.
Not
5'10".
About 5'10", not fat, kind of athletic build. They said he was in good physical shape. Brown or dirty blonde hair.
Yeah, started it probably in his late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, they think he was probably in his early 20s when he started. Blue or hazel eyes. Size 9 shoe. He usually wore tennis shoes or combat boots.
Yeah. He kind of had a little superhero outfit too in one of the drawings. It looked like a tight wetsuit with a belt on it and a gun and a looked like a utility pouch on the other side.
Yeah.
And his
little bulldog tattoo.
Yeah, because he was wearing short sleeves with a bulldog tattoo, and he had his ski mask on. Not quite as scary as the Zodiac Killer's outfit, but pretty intimidating, I guess. If you saw a guy like that.
I would think.
Looked kind of like Daredevil.
Yeah.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, here was the weird thing, though. There was a gap of, I think it was 3 months, I want to say. And the rapes stopped in the Sacramento area. Now, later on, all of these similar kind of things started happening in Southern California, right?
Yeah.
So the funny thing was that at first they thought the East Area Rapist, and then all these murders started happening in Southern California, like 300 miles away, and they thought it was two separate dudes. This was this was 70s and 80s. And, like I said, they didn't have the same communication that they would have nowadays.
Yeah, they ended up linking the two clusters of crimes together with DNA. The rapes and the murders got linked.
But that didn't happen until 1996.
It was later, yeah.
Up until then, they thought the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker, the murderer, were two different guys. And, okay, we're coming up on the half-hour mark, so I'm going to take our first break, and then we will be right back. I would like to take a second and thank Subculture Corsets and Clothing for sponsoring Project iRadio and my show. While listening to my podcast, please take a second and visit their website at www.subculturecorsets.com. They carry a wide selection of corsets, rockabilly, gothic, steampunk, and pinup clothing, shoes, and accessories. Again, their website is subculturecorsets.com, or if you're in the Jacksonville, Florida area, stop by their store in the Avenues Mall. And if you like to save money, use the discount code 13o'clock when checking out and save 10% off your entire order. By the way, if you're a curvy girl, Subculture did not forget about you. They carry size 4 to 4X, and guys, they have men's clothing and shoes as well. So go shop at subculturecorsets.com now and use the discount code 13o'clock for a 10% discount. Okay, and we're back.
Original Night Stalker.
The original Night Stalker.
Yeah.
And the reason that he ended up having that name, like I said, was because they didn't know that this was the same dude.
Right.
Richard Ramirez was called the Night Stalker in the 80s, and then they found out this guy was this rapist and murderer who had done all this shit, who was, worse.
Yeah.
So, they had to call him the original Night Stalker. He doesn't really have his own name. I've seen him called the Golden State Killer. I've seen him called the Diamond Knot Killer, because of that knot that he would tie. But,
The Richard Ramirez Night Stalker paled in comparison to the original Night Stalker.
He did, yeah. This dude was,
He had his shit together.
And like I said, he never got caught. They still don't know who he is. I don't even think they had any. Like I said, I don't think they really had any suspects, did they?
Ramirez was like a cheap knockoff, really, of the original Night Stalker. Even though I don't think Richard Ramirez even knew who the original Night Stalker was.
Yeah.
I don't think he even was aware of this case.
No. Which is really weird, because like I said, that they didn't link them until 1996 when somebody was researching the cold case files.
I think Ramirez was dead by 96, wasn't he?
When did he die?
I don't know. That's something
he just died in prison. He was 53, I think. He'd been in prison for a while.
I doubt Ramirez was aware of this guy.
Probably not.
It would have been a big blow to his ego, probably.
Yeah. But the case we were talking about just now, where the people got away, that was actually in 1979. Now, that happened in Galeta, which is what I think I'm not from California, you are, but that's about 300 miles from Sacramento, right south of Sacramento.
Probably something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Okay, so those two escaped. They lived. Now, that was in October of 1979. At the end of December, another couple had the same thing happen, except they were not as lucky as the first couple. That is, they were both killed. Now, it was actually a doctor. Dr. Robert Offerman was the guy's name, and Deborah Alexander Manning. I think she was a doctor as well, or a psychologist. And they were actually found shot. That was another thing that this guy, I mean, he did pretty much the same thing with the ligatures and the, similar kind of MO. Some of the victims were shot. Most of them were bludgeoned to death.
Yeah, well, I think one time he used a log, didn't he?
A log from the fireplace. Yeah.
And some of it was overkill. I mean, just like smashing the faces in and stuff.
Yeah. They think that he had for some reason, he had a very, very intense hatred of women. Yeah. Because he just went off. Yeah. I mean, he would just crush their skulls and crush their faces. And, the cops that were interviewed, they just said it was the most horrible, scene you'd ever want to see. Wow. But this first couple that were also in Galeta, was a doctor, and like I said, I believe Deborah Manning was a psychologist, if I'm not mistaken. Now, these two were shot, but what they think ended up happening, he did tie them up, but the man's bindings were untied, so they think that he might have lunged at the guy, right? And then the guy kind of lost control, and he shot him both, right? And he shot them both, and they said that neighbors heard the gunshots but thought it was just fireworks or something, so they didn't report anything. On this particular case...
Did they ever mention what caliber that was?
It was 3 different calibers that he used. One was a 38, one was 357, and I don't remember what the other one was. But...
Because in the reenactments, a lot of times they show him with a little, like a small automatic, like a little 380. But I didn't know if he was using more than one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, in a lot of the cases, he bludgeoned the people to death. Sometimes with stuff that was in the house, so he didn't bring anything with him. On this particular murder, the Offerman and Manning murders, they found footprints from a dog, paw prints. So they think he might have brought a dog with him.
Weird.
He went in their refrigerator, and there was leftover Christmas turkey in there, because it was 5 days after Christmas, and they think that he fed some of the turkey to the dog.
Wow, I wonder why he'd bring his dog.
Yeah.
Maybe that was his cover. Walking a dog.
Yeah, could be.
Maybe.
Could be.
Yeah.
So, that was 1979. So those were his 2 couple murders. Now, then in 1980, March of 1980, another couple was found murdered in Ventura. And these were, this was the log bludgeoning. But he had tied them both up. He raped the woman. And then he took a log from their fireplace and beat them to death. This was also, they found the same knot, and he tied them with drapery cord. And then that was in March of 1980. And then there was another one in August of 1980. And that was in Dana Point, California, which I think was a few miles south of Ventura. And this was actually kind of a sad one because they were so young. It was Keith Harrington and Patrice Harrington. Keith was 24. He was a medical student. And Patrice was 27. She was a nurse. And they had been married 3 months.
Terrible.
And Patrice was raped, of course. They had both been tied up, although they didn't find the ligatures this time. And they didn't find the murder weapon this time. I'm not sure if they were... Yeah, I guess they were bludgeoned.
He cut him loose and just took all that stuff with him for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, not sure why.
Maybe he wanted to make it look like he changed his MO, something like that.
Yeah, because that was another thing that whatever they reported in the media, it was almost like if they said, in the paper that he didn't do this at the thing, or he would do that at the next crime scene. So he was obviously following the media coverage, as most serial killers do. Yeah. And
tell about the story of the guy at the meeting.
Oh yeah. Okay. Shit. And actually, I don't think they said this on the Wikipedia page, but we were watching a documentary about it, and they mentioned this. They said, obviously, this might have been. I don't know if this was in Sacramento or if this was in the other areas.
Doesn't really matter.
But it doesn't really matter. So they had this big meeting, in the community because, obviously everyone was freaking out and everyone was scared.
Yeah, they wanted to ask law enforcement questions.
Yeah, they wanted to ask the sheriff's office,
Yep.
like, why haven't you caught this guy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So this one guy stands up and says, I don't see how this could happen. Like, how could a guy just come into your house and just rape your wife and you not do anything about it and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then shortly afterward, the guy broke into his house and did that exact thing. He tied the guy up, he tied the woman up, he raped her.
Did he kill the guy?
No.
Okay.
I think this was before he had started the murdering, so it must have been,
Yeah.
must have been.
He took that as a challenge. He says, okay, I'll show you how it happens.
Yeah. And
so he was there in the crowd.
So they think that
Yeah.
maybe he was at that meeting. Now, you were saying before that how would he have tracked that guy down? I mean, did the guy stand up and go, I'm such and such from this address? Probably not.
Yeah, okay, because he couldn't go up and talk to the guy.
Yeah.
Because the guy might recognize him at the crime scene.
Yeah.
He couldn't follow him home because that guy might figure out he's being followed. So he probably just watched what car he walked into and got that license plate. And then tracked him down by that license plate. Which would lead me to suspect that back in those days, that would be hard to do. I think maybe only a cop could do that.
Yeah.
Or someone who had access to
And
law
there was
enforcement stuff.
speculation that he might be a cop.
The kind of balls he had and the things that he was doing, the things that he was doing, man, sounds kind of cop-like.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in those neighborhoods for long periods of time, scoping out these women, trying to figure it out when he should be somewhere working.
Right.
Or maybe that was his job. Maybe he was a cop.
Yeah.
On the beat.
It would explain a lot.
But I'm sure they thought of that.
Yeah.
You would think that they would be smart enough to come to the conclusion, hey, this might be a cop.
Yeah.
Who patrols this area, Is there anything in common between that area and this area over here?
Right.
Was there a cop that worked over in that part of town? Is he now working in this part of town? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Evidently, there was no connection.
Yeah. I guess not. But like you said, it does seem maybe he was a cop at one point.
Well, he'd have to have access to the I guess the equipment that you would need back in the 70s to track down a license plate. I don't know how it was done back then. Now you could do it pretty easily.
Well, yeah, you
computers.
can find anybody nowadays.
But not in the 70s.
No. Shit, they didn't even, like I said, they didn't even know this was the same dude.
You could probably track down a license plate in the 70s, but you'd probably make a paper trail tracking it.
Yeah.
You'd probably have to go to the DMV and say, who is this?
Who is that? Yeah. Yeah, they'd probably tell you, but like you said, there'd be a record of you
There'd be a record.
But,
maybe he did. Maybe I'm just underestimating. Maybe he just followed that dude home.
Yeah.
And the guy didn't notice it.
Didn't notice it. Yeah. I mean, he seemed
That's
pretty...
a risk, though.
Yeah.
But he did take risks. This guy, original Night Stalker, took a lot of risks.
Yeah.
Breaking into a house once and then setting it up for an invasion, unloading the guns.
Yeah.
Leaving a loophole in the security, like taking screens off.
Yeah.
And then coming back just a day later.
Yeah.
And
like I said, on a few occasions, he posed as a prospective buyer of the house, so people... I mean, they must have seen his face, because he's not going to wear a mask and they're, hey, I'm going to buy the house.
That's a ballsy move. That's very risky.
Yeah.
Somebody could remember his face.
Yeah.
What if somebody who knew him saw him go to that house? Hey, what are you doing here? Were you going to buy this house?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Very risky.
But,
maybe he wasn't rational. Maybe he wasn't thinking about it, just did it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go in there and just act like I'm going to buy this house.
Yeah.
Sometimes, being stupid is quite smart.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just going to leave my bicycle here on the front porch. It's broad daylight. No one would steal this. Go in, come out, it's gone.
Yeah.
That guy's awful dumb to steal this thing in broad daylight. Well, shit, he's got your bicycle. How dumb. It couldn't have been that dumb.
I had a bicycle stolen in broad daylight.
Yeah.
I've had a bicycle stolen in broad daylight. But, okay, so there were actually more murders in what?
Is it time for a second break?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm until maybe like another 5 minutes.
All right.
He's like poking at me, going,
I'm
look
poking,
at
going,
the
hey,
clock,
is it
look at the
about
clock.
time?
No.
Okay.
We just did one. It's all right.
All right.
We'll do one at like 45 minutes.
All right.
All right. So, 1981, February 6th, this woman, her name was Manuela Whithune. She was 28 years old. Also raped and murdered. Now, she was alone in her house at the time, although she was married, but her husband happened to be in the hospital.
Yeah, that's sad.
Recovering from an illness, and she had just come back from the hospital visiting him.
Damn.
And she came back home and she got raped and murdered.
Night Stalker got her.
Yeah. So I don't know if he had actually planned for the guy to be in there and then he wasn't there, or if he was going back to his, hey, woman alone type shit. Because it seemed like...
Maybe he planned for the guy to be there.
That's what I was thinking. Because all the other ones were couple murders. Right. She was the only... in the, you know, in this...
in the later stages.
In this later stage. But, you know, again, she was bludgeoned to death. They found she had been tied up, but no ligatures. Found no murder weapon. And this was the one whose TV was found in the backyard. And he did actually take a lamp from her house.
Yeah. Wonder why.
A lamp and a crystal curio.
Wonder how he got out of there carrying a lamp without attracting attention.
Yeah, what kind of lamp are we talking about? Is it like a big, huge lamp? And a crystal curio, like a curio...
Yeah.
Not a curio cabinet.
Right.
Like just maybe like a crystal doohickey, like a bowl or something.
He saw them, I'm going to take that. That'd look good in my place. That's weird.
That is weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then in July 81, there was another couple murder. Gregory Sanchez and his girlfriend, Sherry Domingo. And these were the 10th and 11th victims. And this was also in Galeta, which it was actually a few blocks from one of the first couple murders where the doctors were murdered. And
yeah, that's the weird thing. He'd kill some people in one house or rape some people in one house, and then a couple weeks later rape some people in a house just like a half a mile away.
Yeah, or a quarter mile away, or the same block.
Same block.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, ballsy.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and get that one.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, after Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez were killed, this was in 1981, then there was a gap of 5 years where no murders or rapes of that MO happened in either area.
5 years. That's like 2 military enlistments, maybe?
Yeah. Or,
like
they speculate he might have been incarcerated for something else.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I think if that guy ever fell into custody, they'd be suspicious of him.
Yeah.
Because he'd get caught doing something that's kind of related, like cat burglary or peeping Tom type stuff. And they'd go into his house probably and say, "Hey, what's that lamp doing there?" You know, that kind of stuff.
Hey, that lamp looks familiar.
Yeah, that lamp looks familiar. I think he had money. He wasn't stealing anything, so he wasn't living off of the commission of crime.
No.
He had a regular job.
Yeah.
Or he had a rich family. Something like that.
I was kind of thinking that, actually.
Yeah, he might have inherited a bunch of money and he didn't work.
Yeah.
If he didn't work in those communities, then he didn't need to work.
Yeah.
You couldn't run a full-time job doing what he was doing.
No, there's no way. How would he have time?
He wouldn't have time.
No. So after, like I said, after Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez were killed, then there was a 5-year gap. It stopped. But then, in 1986, in May, a girl named Janelle Cruz, who was only 18 years old, found raped and bludgeoned in Irvine. Her mother was in Mexico on vacation.
Yeah, I saw it, and they showed them both. They were both real good-looking women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Janelle had been left by herself.
Yeah.
Now, originally, Janelle's murder, they thought that it was maybe her boyfriend or her little friend who had been, because he had been over at the house like the night before.
Yeah, he didn't want to say that he was over there.
And he didn't want to say that he was over there, maybe mom didn't approve of him or something like that. But
maybe he had a girlfriend.
Yeah, or that too.
Something like that.
Or that too. But it was quickly determined from, later from DNA and stuff like that, that it wasn't him.
She was the last one, huh?
And that was the last one that they know of, 1986.
Right.
Janelle Cruz, she was the last one. And she was bludgeoned to death with a pipe wrench, I believe.
Wow.
And her mother said that her face and head was just crushed.
Yeah.
He first hit her from the back, and then he just went off.
Yeah, and she said that he hit her in the back of the head while she was walking away from him, so she must have not been tied down.
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was her mom talking, so maybe
she didn't know.
Maybe she didn't know. But yeah, so at that point, like I said, in the 80s, they didn't know that they thought this was two separate guys.
Yeah.
In 1996, someone was going through some of the cold case files and came across some of this shit and said, "Hey, I'm gonna check the DNA on this and that and the other thing. And it turned out, and actually at the time, there was like a couple investigators that suspected that maybe this was the same dude, but most of the investigators were like, nah, it's not the same dude. It's not the same. Even though the MO was very similar. But when they did the DNA, they found out, yes, the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker, Golden State Killer, whatever, that was happening in Irvine and whatever, it was the same guy. Which means that in total, this man was responsible for at least 50 rapes and 12 murders.
At least.
That they know of.
Right.
Which makes him one of the most prolific, they said one of the most prolific serial offenders in history.
Yeah.
California history, U.S. history.
And I bet there's more.
Oh, I'm sure. There usually are.
I bet you he had little side gigs that you'll never know about.
Yeah.
He might have been also picking up hookers and killing them. You don't know.
Right. Yeah, and the only reason these ones got investigated because these were all kind of upper middle class.
And maybe he killed the hookers a different way.
Yeah.
Or the bodies were never found. Something like that.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
All right, so right now I'm going to take our second break.
Go ahead and take it.
And then we'll kind of come back and wrap the stuff up.
Yeah.
And that's how we do. So here's the second break. Enjoy.
There are terrors, real and imaginary, and I write about them all. Paranormal nonfiction, horror fiction, the Rochdale House of Fire, the Mammoth Mountain Poltergeist, the Associated Monsters, Red Menace, the Five Poisons, Bellwether. Go to www.jennyashford.com or search Amazon for the Jenny Ashford author page.
Okay. Now, another interesting aspect of this case, and they talked about this a little bit in one of the documentaries we saw about it, was that they wondered, because the rapes and murders stopped in 1986, and they didn't find, there were no further crimes that matched that MO. So they wondered if perhaps he had been incarcerated for something else. So what they did was they kind of went through the California penal system, and they tried to find dudes who were out at that particular time period, who had committed the similar types of crimes.
That had that kind of same description.
Same description, same age, whatnot. And they wanted to collect DNA samples, because at this point, they had DNA samples of the guy.
Yeah.
They just didn't have anything to compare it to.
Right.
So they found one dude that was in prison. He was on death row, I believe, for something else. And he kind of matched the profile of what they were looking for. And they, so they asked for some blood so they could get some DNA, and he said no.
Of course he's going to say no.
Now, apparently in California at the time, the law was they couldn't force the inmates to give blood.
Well, he's on death row. He said no because he wanted some cookies and he wanted a case of soda delivered. He's not going to give it up for free.
I want cookies.
Yeah, you're going to have to bring me something. You want something from me. You got to give me something.
Right.
That's probably what happened there.
So actually, that inmate saying no to giving blood actually led to one of the victim's brothers had a lot of money, and he put about $2 million into backing a law that would make it so that they could use quote unquote reasonable force to take DNA samples from inmates.
Yeah.
So that ended up passing. They did collect samples from all of these guys, but found nothing.
Yeah, it wasn't him.
So at this point,
so the guy who said no was just doing it to be a dick?
Yeah, he was just being a dick. He's not really the killer. He's just like, I just don't want to do it. Fuck you. The man's not taking my blood. But, so at this point, like I said, 40th anniversary of the first rape.
Yeah.
They still have no idea who this dude is.
Yeah.
There were no suspects, no nothing. Now, if you go on the FBI website, they have like a little, section about it that kind of gives a rundown of the case and what they know about him, which isn't a lot. They have some sketches, but like I said, they all look kind of different.
Yeah.
And he just looks like dude. He just looks like...
One looks like the 1970s Flash, or the 1980s Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
And the other one looks like Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
And the other one looks like Donald Duck.
Yeah, kind of. It's like, he just looks like a regular guy. He's just a regular white guy.
Yeah, he was kind of described as just kind of like a middle class or upper middle class white guy.
Yeah. And they've also done, they've had their, serial killer profilers in there doing a psychological profile. They actually think if anybody knows this guy, they're like, he's a dick in life. Arrogant, superior.
Yeah. Probably abusive.
Controlling. Yeah. They're actually kind of hoping that they said, now, if he's doing this shit to these women, then he's probably doing it to any consensual partners as well.
Yeah, he's a wife beater.
Right. Yeah. So they kind of want to find either prostitutes or women who might have been in a consensual relationship with him.
Although that's just theory.
Yeah, this is theoretical.
Because BTK was a dick, but he wasn't a dick to his wife.
Yeah.
All right. But he was a real dick to his victims. And he was a dick to everybody else. His job was to be a dick.
Yeah.
He was fining people for having their lawns a little bit too long and not housing their dogs correctly. And, he was a stickler.
Yeah, he got off on that little petty control kind of shit.
Right. So he might... I think he's going to be a guy a lot like BTK.
Yeah, I kind of get the impression that he's probably that kind of a dude.
Yeah.
Like, he really likes having control, total control over a situation.
I think he had a minor official position in something, somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Mailman, dog catcher.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Like you said, like BTK, they want to have control, but they're really not.
They're not all that powerful.
Yeah, they're kind of, BTK was kind of he was kind of a loser.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, dog catchers, like Garbage Man, I wouldn't call them losers. They make money.
Yeah.
But they're not as powerful as, say, like a senator or an emperor or a president. They want to be an emperor. They want to be a king.
Yeah.
That's what they want to be.
But that's kind of what this dude sounds like. From the psychological profile, that's probably what this dude is like.
If he's not dead, he's still out there.
Yeah.
That's not saying much. Yeah. But,
He would probably be, depending on how old he was, if, say, he was 25 when he committed the first rapes, then he would be 65 now.
Yeah, he's probably out there.
He could be somebody's grandpa.
I predict that he'll come forward. If he's alive, if he didn't, die from disease or die by an accident earlier on, he'll probably come forward, do a deathbed confession to cash in on all his rep points. Think about it.
Yeah.
And then he can re-victimize everybody.
Yeah.
And then he can, I did that shit.
Yeah.
They like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out with a bang,
I could see that.
Yeah, you'll probably hear from him.
Yeah. But
because look at if you're, let's say you're dying, you're getting old.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you don't have a whole lot to look forward to, in terms of time. Why would you just waste away in obscurity when you could reclaim that spotlight?
Yeah.
And say, that was me. It had shows, and just like BTK did. Even though you could say that BTK didn't really just come forward and confess, the stuff that BTK did will get you caught.
Yeah, he did it on purpose.
He kind of did it on purpose, yeah.
Like without being
real obvious.
Now, this guy, original Night Stalker, he did do some of that kind of shit. Like, he sent a poem to the Sacramento Bee. Allegedly.
We don't know that's really him. Really.
They found some, maps and stuff, allegedly, that he had drawn of, his stakeout areas and things like that.
But then again, I could be wrong because, Zodiac never came forward.
True.
But Zodiac could have gotten killed. That's another
thing. That's what I mean. And that could have happened to this guy, too. It's like, they, who's to say that he didn't break into somebody's house and they shot his ass?
Yeah, and they didn't call the cops.
Or
they captured him.
Yeah.
That would be worst case scenario for him.
Yeah.
He's ridden there raping the dude's wife, and that dude gets free.
Yeah.
Captures that guy, and they torture him to death.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they're not going to call the cops.
No.
No.
Especially if they know who it is.
Was it? Well, they...
That's what I mean. They would know. They would know that was that guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, sure, because of the MO. And everybody in those areas knew that this was going on.
Right.
And there may have been one badass out there saying, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a blade underneath my bed so I can roll off the bed and cut these ligatures.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to grab this hidden weapon. I'm going to come out and I'm going to capture him and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to torture that dude to death.
Yeah.
That may have happened to him.
Yeah.
There's always a bigger fish.
Oh, yeah.
And, Just because you're not out there killing all these people doesn't mean that, there isn't some hidden badass out there going, yeah, come in this house. I'm gonna get you. That may have happened.
Yeah, could have.
Because, you might have some guys saying that, well, if the cops get him, justice will not be done.
Yeah.
Because they'll just lock him up. I'm going to bring justice to this guy.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
They might have killed him over a period of days. You don't know.
Yeah.
So we don't know.
We don't know. But if he is still alive, he'd be kind of an old man now.
About time to step forward.
Yeah.
Why not?
FBI is offering $50,000 for any information. Looking for new tips. Yeah. Anybody that might remember him or remember something they saw back then. And I'll probably put all those links in there and whatnot.
Yeah.
But we're probably coming up. I took a second break, didn't I?
Yeah, you took a second break. We could wrap it up.
I don't even remember. I'm so tired. Yeah. But we went through Hurricane Matthew. And we're a little, and it wasn't even that bad where we were, But
went without power for a while. Had to run the generator. It wasn't running right.
Yeah, it kind of sucked.
We don't want to bore them with all that, though.
Yeah, but it was a lot worse for other people. But yeah, it did kind of suck. We haven't had much sleep. So that's why we're kind of rambling. But so anyway, hope you enjoyed the show on the original Night Stalker. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe to our channel or check us out on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And I probably will put the little screen up there with all that shit on there.
And next time we won't be tired.
Yeah. I think we did okay, though.
Yeah, for being tired, we did all right.
Yeah.
I'm mumbling a little bit.
That's okay. You can mumble.
I kept my eyes open.
Until now. Now they're closed.
Yeah, they're closing.
Now they're closed. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.